And now to someone who has first-hand experience of those brutal Syrian cells, Omar Alshogre, who is a political prisoner at the infamous Sednaya prison and is now Director for Detainee Affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. Thank you very much indeed, Omar, for joining me. Now, we have heard horrendous reports and we've seen some pretty terrible pictures from that particularly notorious prison. To start with, can you just tell us your experience of it, what it was like to be forced inside it?
I was a child when I was arrested for the first time and when I was tortured for the first time. And then I was released and I was arrested again for 3 years. And these 3 years, the Syrian regime has managed to show us all sort of torture and starvation and all sort of mental torture. To give you just a quick example, taking you away from all the physical images that I could paint in your head, let's put that on the side. Think about the mental ones. Imagine when the guards came to our cells and the guard would tell me and my cellmates that we had to choose one of us to be killed tomorrow, tortured to death tomorrow. And if we don't choose one of us, they may kill 5 or 10. And then the guard leaves. And you sit in your cell with your cellmates. You have to ask the question. And you have to ask the question saying, who wants to be killed tomorrow brutally and never go back to their family? Who wants to never smell the fresh air again? Who wants to never be able to feel anything and just die? And it's a very challenging question. And then we had to find ways because it was not the easiest thing to get a volunteer for. So we had to make a lottery where the name that get picked or the number that get picked get killed tomorrow behind our backs by the guard. So that's an example of what these prisons are like and why it was very necessary to free all the prisoners inside them, because those are not prisons where any human rights are reserved in any way. And the people in these prisons, in my experience, are not criminals. Every single person I was with was innocent political prisoner. Many of them haven't even really spoken against the regime. They were arrested. Last time I was arrested and put in that notorious prison, I didn't do anything. I was at home. They arrested me from home with my cousins who died under torture.
And we're talking there about the Sednaya prison in Damascus. What you've said is very, very hard to get your head around. And for me to get my head around, it's almost unimaginable horror. And we're talking now about people who were, as it were, domestic political prisoners, not the ISIS people I was talking about at the beginning of the show. But what are your reflections on the atmosphere now in Syria after the horror and the torture and the death that the Assad regime imposed upon people? Is there a sort of burning desire for revenge? Is there a danger that Syria starts to break apart between different factions? How do you see it?
Syrians have been for years longing for justice. And I think the first step towards justice is bringing down the regime. And that's checked now. The regime is down. So now we are in a very sensitive time where we actually have to make sure that we take care of the freedom we have and we build a democracy that respects our lives, and we don't just hand the leadership to anyone who we think did something good. A lot of people did something good. Every Syrian has contributed in the falling of the Syrian regime. Not a person, not a group, not the military has brought down the regime. Every Syrian who fought, who spoke up, who moved, who fled, who were tortured, who were starved, contributed to the falling of the Syrian regime. And that regime, with 53 years of torture and starvation of its people, have led to a lot of extremism, which in my opinion, what do you expect from someone who was tortured? Their bones were broken. Their family was killed in front of their eyes. They were starved. They were bombed with chemical weapons. What do you expect them to be? Cutesy? You know, they don't become like that. They get mad. They get sad. They get very frustrated. They want to join any military group that could do the same harm that was done to them, to that Syrian regime. So that created an environment where people wanted to join any group. And some of these people joined ISIS and joined other groups because they wanted revenge from this regime. Today, I can tell you a different story. My sister has been hiding in Syria for 10 years because the regime knew that she was in Syria and I'm doing advocacy work. The regime would have killed her. And she's on the coast in Syria in a small town called Banyas, that Sunni town is surrounded by Alawites. Alawites have been used by the regime as the right hand of the regime to kill protesters and to kill opposition. And that was the real fear in Syria when the regime falls, that people will go and revenge, ask for revenge on the coast in Syria. One second. What happened is that when the regime fell, my sister and our city went out to the street celebrating, and the buses were coming. A lot of buses were coming from the Alawite villages, and I can send you videos of that. And the elder of the Alawite people will hold the mic and will say, "We're sorry. We've been used by the regime. We're forced to be part of this this system, and we apologize, and we want to be part of this society." And people hug and kissed, and they danced together, and they've been celebrating the last few days.
So alongside the anger, there is reconciliation as well. Omar, it's been a real privilege to have you on the show tonight. Thank you very, very much indeed for talking to me.